Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'd grown up in a small town, and heading off to college in the big city felt like stepping into a completely different world. My parents had saved for years to make this happen, and I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. The first semester had been a whirlwind of adjusting to city life, navigating campus, and figuring out how to survive on instant noodles and cafeteria food. When winter break finally came, I couldn't wait to get home and sleep in my own bed. Those few weeks at home flew by way too fast. Before I knew it, I was back at the airport dragging my overstuffed suitcase behind me and mentally preparing myself for the journey back to campus. The flight had been delayed twice, so by the time I landed, it was already dark outside. My phone said it was almost 8:30 p.m. when I finally collected my luggage. I still had to navigate across the entire city using a combination of subway lines and buses, which wouldn't have been so bad if I wasn't hauling around a massive suitcase, my backpack stuffed with textbooks I'd brought home but never opened, and a carrying case for my laptop. The subway station was crowded even at this hour. I maneuvered through the turnstile, almost knocking over my suitcase in the process, and followed the signs to make my first transfer. When I got off the train, I immediately started scanning for the elevator. There was no way I was attempting the escalators with all this luggage. I'd seen too many videos of that going horribly wrong. I spotted the elevator just as the door slid shut. A small group of people had already formed a line waiting patiently for it to come back down. There was a mother with a stroller near the front, a man in a wheelchair right behind her, and a few other tired-looking travelers. I took my place at the end, grateful for the chance to catch my breath. The suitcase felt like it had gained 20 pounds during the flight. That's when she appeared. A woman in what looked like an expensive fur coat came walking up, not toward the back of the line like a normal person, but straight toward the front. She didn't even hesitate. She started physically pushing people aside, trying to wedge herself ahead of everyone who'd been waiting. The mother with the stroller had to pull it back to avoid getting knocked over. The man in the wheelchair got bumped and had to steady himself. When she got to me, I was so tired that my usual filter was completely gone. I turned to face her and asked where she thought she was going, pointing out that she needed to get in line like everyone else who'd been waiting. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her entire family tree. Her eyes went wide and her face twisted into this expression of pure disgust. She asked if I could read and jabbed her finger toward a sign on the wall that said something like, "Please give priority to elderly and disabled passengers." I was exhausted. My back hurt from sitting in an airplane seat designed for someone half my height, and I'd been traveling for nearly 8 hours. Whatever patience I might have had under normal circumstances was completely used up. I asked her which category she fell into, whether she was elderly or disabled. She didn't look a day over 40. I watched her face turn red. Her whole body started shaking like she was about to explode. She called me a rude, ignorant brat and screamed that she was older than me and that I needed to treat her with respect. I smiled at the irony. I told her that while she might be older than me, that didn't make her elderly. I also pointed out that she was talking about respect while she just pushed aside a mother with a stroller and a man in a wheelchair. I asked her where her respect was for all the people she got in front of. That was apparently the final straw. She threw her arms out wide, her fur coat spreading like some kind of deranged bird, and swung her purse at me. I stepped back out of reflex, and her bag sailed past me and smacked directly into another woman standing nearby. The impact was hard enough that the woman stumbled backward. The entire line erupted. People started yelling at her, telling her to calm down, asking what was wrong with her. The mother with the stroller was shouting about how dangerous that was. The man in the wheelchair was calling her out for being violent. Somewhere in the chaos, someone must have called security because a guard appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Multiple people immediately started pointing at the woman in the fur coat, all talking over each other to explain what had happened. The guard turned to her and said he needed her to come with him. That's when things went from bad to absolutely insane. She started screaming obscenities at everyone within earshot, starting with the guard and working her way around to me and pretty much everyone else in the vicinity. She was calling people names, saying we were all against her, that she'd done nothing wrong. The guard didn't waste any time. He grabbed his radio and called for backup while trying to grab her arm, but she attempted to run away. Watching someone try to sprint in heels while wearing a heavy fur coat might have been the funniest thing I'd seen all year. She made it maybe 3 steps before she started wobbling. Her heels were clicking frantically against the floor as she tried to gain speed. More guards arrived within seconds and literally had to drag her toward another elevator. She was kicking and screaming the entire way. It turned out the situation was more serious than I'd realized. The woman she'd accidentally hit with her purse had a split lip and was bleeding. Someone had already given her tissues to hold against her mouth. She wanted to press charges. The guards asked me to come with them as a witness, so we all took a different elevator up to the security office. The injured woman came too, still holding tissues to her lip. The police showed up about 15 minutes later. They took statements from everyone who'd seen what happened. I explained how she'd tried to cut in line, pushing past the mother with the stroller and the man in the wheelchair. I told them how I'd questioned her and how she'd swung her bag at me but hit someone else instead. The woman with the split lip gave her account, explaining how she'd been standing there minding her own business when she got hit. The mother with the stroller came up too and gave a statement about being pushed. The man in the wheelchair explained how he'd been bumped and nearly knocked over. Several other witnesses who'd seen the whole thing unfold gave their versions of events. Everyone's story lined up perfectly. The woman in the fur coat kept trying to talk over everyone, insisting she'd done nothing wrong, that we were all lying, that she was the victim here. She claimed she was being discriminated against because of her age. She said the sign clearly gave her priority, and we were all too stupid to understand that. The police weren't having it. One of the officers pointed out that the sign said elderly and disabled and that she appeared to be neither. He also noted that even if she had some claim to priority, that didn't give her the right to assault people. The injured woman confirmed she wanted to press charges for assault. In the end, they took the woman in the fur coat to the station along with the injured woman so she could formally file charges. I gave my contact information in case they needed any follow-up statements and was finally allowed to continue my journey back to campus. The mother with the stroller thanked me before she left. The man in the wheelchair gave me a nod of appreciation. By the time I made it to my dorm room, it was past 11 p.m. and I'd been traveling for over 10 hours. I'd witnessed someone get arrested over an elevator and had to give a police statement on my first night back. College was definitely turning out to be more eventful than I'd expected. I dropped my bags on the floor and collapsed onto my bed without even unpacking. My roommate wasn't back yet, so the room was quiet. I've dealt with anxiety my whole life, and most of it stems from things I'd rather not talk about involving my parents. When I was a kid, I'm autistic and have severe PTSD that makes everyday tasks feel like climbing a mountain. Loud noises send me into a spiral, and being touched without warning can trigger a full-blown panic attack. I take medication for depression and migraines, but some days the pills only take the edge off. After years on a waiting list, I finally got approved for Section 8 housing a few months back and moved to a new city where I didn't know anyone. A friend gave me a parting gift before I left, a black Razor Kick scooter. It wasn't one of those cheap things you find at big box stores. This one was built sturdier for adults, with bigger wheels and a solid frame. I could fold it up and carry it anywhere. In a new city with no car and limited bus routes, that scooter became my lifeline. I took it everywhere. Grocery shopping, appointments, anywhere I needed to go. I'd fold it up and put it right in my shopping cart while I browsed the aisles. Most people left me alone. I know I look a little off, kind of twitchy and nervous, but that suits me fine. The less attention I get, the better. But there's one thing that'll make me lose it faster than anything. Someone taking my stuff or putting their hands on me without asking. I was at the grocery store one afternoon, standing in the canned food aisle and looking at chunky soup. I grabbed a couple cans, tossed them in my cart, and reached for my scooter to make sure it was still there. It wasn't. I felt my stomach drop. I spun around and saw a woman speed walking toward the front of the store with a kid trailing behind her. She was carrying my scooter. I shouted after her to bring it back. She didn't even turn around. I left my cart right there in the middle of the aisle and ran after them. When I finally caught up, I reached out and tried to grab the scooter from her hands. The kid immediately started screaming at the top of his lungs. The sound was so sharp and piercing that my ears started ringing. My brain just shut down for a second. Before I could even process what was happening, the woman shoved me hard. I stumbled backward and barely caught myself from falling. She was yelling something at me, but I couldn't hear her over the ringing in my ears and the kid still shrieking. A manager appeared out of nowhere and started asking what was going on. I tried to explain, but the woman cut me off before I could get a single word out. She called me a creep and demanded that I be thrown out for trying to steal from her son. She claimed they were trying to buy the scooter and I'd attacked them. The manager told me I needed to calm down. I kept trying to say it was my scooter and that I brought it into the store with me, but she just kept yelling over me. The manager separated us and told me to follow him to an office in the back. I sat there while he went to talk to the woman. When he came back, he looked annoyed. He told me he'd sold the scooter to the customer and said I couldn't just take merchandise from people who were trying to purchase it. I felt my chest tighten. I explained again that it wasn't merchandise and that I'd brought it into the store with me. He pointed out that the scooter was from their bike section and mentioned he'd even had to give her a discount because of what I'd done. I felt like my chest was going to explode. My hands were shaking and I could barely get the words out. I told him they didn't sell that scooter there and that she'd taken it from my cart. He just stared at me like I was making it up. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers and showed him a photo my friend had taken of me holding the scooter the day I got it. The manager's face went pale. He ran out of the office without saying a word. When he came back a few minutes later, he looked panicked. He said the woman had already left. I immediately started dialing 911. The manager reached over and put his hand on my phone to stop me. I jerked away so hard I nearly fell out of the chair. My vision blurred and I could feel myself spiraling. I shouted at him not to touch me. He backed up fast, holding his hands up. He apologized and said he'd buy me another scooter from the store since they had some in stock. I told him I didn't want one from the store and that I wanted my scooter back. What I didn't realize was that 911 had already connected. The operator's voice came through my phone asking if I needed help. I told them someone stole my property and I needed the police. The manager looked like he wanted to disappear. It took over an hour for the police to arrive and review the security footage. The cameras showed everything. Me walking into the store with the scooter, the woman and her kid taking it from my cart while I was looking at soup, me chasing after them, the kid screaming, her shoving me, all of it. The officer told me they'd track her down using the parking lot footage. They got her license plate number and found her address. I rode in the back of the police car while we drove to her apartment complex. The officer got out and knocked on her door. I stayed in the car with the windows up so I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see her face. She looked furious at first. Then the officer pointed back at the car. Her expression changed. She went inside and came back out holding the scooter. Her kid was clinging to her leg and crying. She practically had to wrestle it away from him. The officer let me out of the car and asked if I wanted to press charges for assault since she'd shoved me. The woman's face went completely white. I said yes, I wanted to press charges. She started crying and begging me not to. She said she honestly thought it was something the store was selling and that it was her kid's birthday. I yelled back that it didn't give her the right to steal from someone else's cart, especially not from a legally disabled person. Her kid was still wailing and the noise was making my head pound. I felt like I was going to pass out. I told her I wouldn't press charges if she stayed away from me and my stuff, but I said I wanted something done about the manager who let this happen. I was ready to ride my scooter all the way back to the store, but the officers convinced me to just go home and calm down. A couple days later, I went back to the store. One of the employees told me the manager had been fired. He already had several complaints against him and didn't bother checking if the scooter was actually store property. The woman and her kid were banned from the store for 6 months, but they gave them one of the scooters they actually sold as a replacement since she'd already paid for it. I got a $50 gift card for my trouble. Now, when I go to that store, some of the employees know me by name. One of them even shooed away a random kid who asked about my scooter. I keep a much closer eye on it now. I also added a name tag on the underside with my full name just in case. My dad owns a convenience store that he runs completely by himself. When I turned 14, he asked if I wanted to help out on weekends and after school. I agreed because the extra money seemed nice, and honestly, the work isn't that hard. I mostly just stand behind the register and ring people up. We have a big sign on the counter that clearly states we don't accept returns. Dad put it there after years of people trying to pull scams on him. The day before my parents' anniversary, Dad decided to go to the mall. He wanted to find something really special for Mom and figured it would take a couple hours. He left me in charge of the store around 10 in the morning. I'd done this plenty of times before, so it wasn't a big deal. The morning was pretty slow with just a few customers here and there. Around noon, a woman came storming through the front door. She was carrying a gallon of milk and looked absolutely furious. I started to greet her the way I usually greet customers. She immediately cut me off and started yelling at me. She demanded a refund right away and slammed the milk jug down on the counter. The impact was so hard that I actually jumped back a little. She claimed the milk had been sold to her expired and she wanted her money back immediately. I pulled the jug closer to examine the expiration date she was complaining about. As soon as I looked at it, I could tell something was completely wrong. Someone had covered the original date with white out and written a new one with a Sharpie marker. The condensation on the jug was making the Sharpie ink smear and run everywhere. It was the most obvious fake I'd ever seen in my life. I tried to stay calm and explained that we didn't offer refunds at our store. I pointed to the sign right in front of her on the counter. Then I mentioned that someone had clearly put a fake expiration date on the milk. She started yelling even louder than what I was saying was complete nonsense. She demanded her money back again, raising her voice with each word. I attempted to explain our policy one more time. She told me to save it and demanded to speak with the owner immediately. At this point, I was starting to get genuinely frightened. This woman was absolutely massive, probably around 6'7". I'm barely 4'11", so she towered over me like a giant. She leaned over the counter and glared down at me with pure rage in her eyes. I explained that my dad had gone to the mall to buy a gift for my mom's anniversary. I suggested she could come back another day when he was here to discuss it with him. That explanation only made her angrier than she already was. She reached across the counter toward me. Before I could move away, she grabbed my wrist and yanked me forward hard. My chest slammed into the edge of the counter and knocked the wind out of me. She pulled me close and demanded that I give her the refund right now. She also insisted I give her the business phone number and my dad's personal cell phone number. Her grip on my wrist was painfully tight and getting tighter by the second. I could feel tears starting to well up in my eyes, but I tried to hold them back. I told her I would go get the business number from the back office. I pulled away from her, and she finally let go of my wrist. The throbbing pain started immediately as I hurried toward the back room. Once I was safely out of her sight, I grabbed my phone instead of any paperwork. I dialed 911 as quietly as I possibly could. I whispered to the operator about what was happening and that the woman had assaulted me. The operator told me to stay in the back room and that police were being sent right away. When I waited, I logged into the computer we keep in the office. I pulled up the security camera footage and found the clip of her grabbing me. I saved the video to make sure we had proof of what she'd done. Then I started making random noises so she'd think I was actually searching for documents. I moved boxes around and shuffled papers to keep up the act. About 10 minutes passed before I heard the front door chime. I peeked out carefully and saw two police officers walking into the store. The woman had completely transformed her entire demeanor. She was casually browsing the chip aisle like she was just a regular customer shopping for snacks. She was acting like nothing had happened and she just stopped in to buy something. I came out from the back room and walked straight over to the officers. I explained everything from the beginning, starting with the fake expiration date. I told them how she'd yelled at me and then grabbed my wrist when I refused the refund. Then I showed them the security footage I'd saved on my phone. They watched the entire clip and their expressions became increasingly serious. One of the officers approached the woman and asked to see her identification. At first, she tried to act confused about why the police were even there. She pretended like she had no idea what was going on. The officers asked her to step outside with them and she reluctantly agreed. I watched through the store window when they ran her information in their system. The officers returned inside about 5 minutes later with important news. They told me the woman had multiple outstanding warrants for her arrest. Apparently, she'd been running similar scams at stores all over the area. She had several fraud charges and at least 3 shoplifting charges from different locations. Now she was also getting an assault charge for what she'd done to my wrist. I immediately called my dad and explained the entire situation. He rushed back to the store within 20 minutes, looking completely panicked. The gift bag he'd been carrying got tossed onto the counter when he checked on me. My wrist had a bright red mark where she grabbed me, and bruising was starting to form. Dad spoke with the police officers and told them he wanted to press charges. He was angry about the assault and the attempted fraud. The officers took photos of my injured wrist and the milk jug with the fake date. The woman was arrested in our parking lot right then and there. She screamed the entire time about how unfair the situation was. She kept insisting she'd just been trying to get her money back for expired milk. Nobody believed a single word she said. Dad decided to close the shop early and took me straight home. Mom was surprised to see us back so soon since Dad had said he'd be gone longer. He explained everything that had happened when Mom examined my wrist. She got some ice for the bruising and gave me a long hug. The next day, my parents went ahead with their anniversary celebration. Dad gave Mom the necklace he'd purchased at the mall. They went out to a nice dinner together that evening. I stayed home and ordered pizza for myself, enjoying the peace and quiet. A few weeks later, we received a letter in the mail about the case. It explained that the woman had been sentenced for all her crimes. Between all her existing warrants and the new charges, she was facing serious jail time. My dad took down the old no return sign and had it professionally framed. He hung it even higher on the wall where it was impossible to miss. He joked that if customers couldn't see it before, they definitely could see it now. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.